Suddenly starting to climb. It was the music of something beginning, an era exploding, a century spinning in riches and bands and in rhythm and rhyme. The people called it ragtime. Ragtime, ragtime, ragtime.
Hi everyone. Hello. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name's Jordan Lee Smith, and I am the founder of the actor-muso community, which was put together earlier this year during the pandemic to offer an opportunity for actor musicians to connect, reconnect, and get to know each other and share skills and knowledge of the art form. And we're hoping in the future to do more of these talks. This is the first one that we're doing. And in the future, hopefully some masterclasses and workshops, hopefully in person very soon as well. So, and we also have a Facebook group, which is full of actor musos and creatives who work in actor musician productions and those who are interested in the art form of actor musicianship and how that could work for them in the future. So without further ado, I'm very, very excited to bring to the stage, or whatever you want to call it here, Danielle Tarento. Hi, Danielle. How are you?
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm not too bad at all. How are you today? You all right?
Very good. I have to apologise to you and everybody else watching. I have the worst hay fever ever known to man. So if I start crying and sneezing, please don't think it's anything that any of you have done. It's just I am suffering so badly. But apart from that, I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much.
Amazing. Fantastic. Now, before we start, I'll just say to everyone, if you ever have a question during tonight, please just put it in the comments straight away. Don't wait till the end. There's a bit of a delay that's going on here, about 20 seconds. So we might not get through all the questions if we all suddenly come in at the end. So if you have a question, just put it in and we'll just answer it as we go along. So, Danielle, Ragtime 2016, I want to say.
You would be right in saying that, yes.
Yeah. You know what? The first thing that I was actually surprised about is that it hadn't been done earlier. This idea of actor musicianship, ragtime, and where did the idea come from? Well,
as often happens with my productions where I collaborate with director Tom Sutherland, the ideas often come from him. He's an incredible director who has vision of reimagining things that we know and love and putting them in a different way. And I mean, I've never been a producer that's particularly interested in just doing another version or a rehash of. For me, if I'm going to revisit something especially something that's so incredibly loved and renowned and remembered, there has to be a really good reason for doing so. And I think part of the reason why Tom and I work together so well is because he comes from that same stock. He thinks that the same, and he has always, all the shows that we've done which have been revivals have been slightly turned on their head in whatever way that might end up manifesting itself. He came to me with the idea. He said, I've loved ragtime since the first time. If anyone doesn't love ragtime the first time they hear it, there's something wrong with them and they shouldn't be in the industry, or actually probably even have ears, because it's just the most extraordinary score, I think. So I've loved it forever, but always thought, well, I mean, what's the point? You know, if in New York they needed to knock two theatres together in order to tell this story, it's maybe not going to be one that I'm going to do. And then but I've got an idea, which is, you know, the scariest words ever to hear out of that man's mouth, because it normally means it's going to cost me several £100,000 to find out what that actually means. But he said, I've had an idea. And he mentioned about doing it actor-musician. And we sort of sat there, you know, and from a producer's point of view, then you sit down and you look at the numbers and you go, okay, how can we make this? Can we make this work? Does it make sense? And it makes far more sense than it does to have actors and musicians, because you'd need the same number of both. Having said that, I would never in a million years choose to do any show because it made sense on paper. The reason we did Ragtime as an actor-musician show was not because the numbers made sense. The jump just happens to make sense out of this brilliant new version that he come up with. Yeah,
it's certainly concept first, isn't it, in terms of the best actor-musician productions. Absolutely.
Yeah, yes, and I think, I mean, the actor-musician shows that I've seen that I've liked the least have been the ones where I've looked at and gone, if you'd had an orchestra down there instead of on stage, it would have been better.
Yeah, for sure.
Where the decision has simply been made because there wasn't money to do it another way. And that's, I think, is just such a shame.
And then when it came to, so this idea, fantastic, but obviously you can't just do it. We need to convince the writers.
Yes, we do.
How did that go down?
If I'm honest, at the beginning, not well. So when we applied for the rights, we mentioned, so it's represented by a company who I know the director very, very well. And I always sort of, you know, wave something under his nose first and say, do you think this is something they're going to go for? The first question is always, are the rights available? Yes, the rights are available. We've had an idea. Scariest words in musical theatre. Scariest words in the world, actually. What do you think? And he said, I think it's highly unlikely because they're very protective of the work and what's been, you know, the orchestrations and the way it's been created is, you know, to tell this sort of epic story. So I said, okay, well, we're not really, I mean, the way we want to do it and the way we were, because we were doing it at Charing Cross, it doesn't work. It wouldn't have worked with the scale if we'd had 25 actors on stage and whatever what is it scored for, Jordan? I can't remember. Is it 20?
Well, you did the full version. I think it's 25.
Yeah. There's just no way that, I mean, most theatres don't do that. I mean, let's not talk about Phantom, but most theatres can't do that anymore, right? That's another podcast. That's another conversation every day. But so there was just no. So my response to that was, well, if the answer is no to that, then we can't do the show. So can we just at least put it? And I don't think by that point I'd met them, either of them. I think I didn't know Lynn or Steve at all by that point. I mean, you, of course, but anyway. So we wrote. So we said, as I said, we need to put a really watertight, solid proposal together that outlines why this will be a good idea and why it's right for us and why it's right for the theatre and why it's right for now and all the reasons. And so I went back to Tom and I said, Tom, I need your concept on paper. I need you to write down. So he wrote this concept, and it was like, and I read it back and thought, do you know what? This is the sort of proposal that someone's going to go, yeah, but no, because that's not what we wrote. So no. So I went back to Tom and said, I think we've got to be a bit more. We've got to have a bit more meat on our bones to that. And he said, okay. He said, I did write another version, but I thought if I wrote that, we never get the rights for anything ever again because I'm starting really controversially. And I said, send it to me and I'll read it. He said, I'm actually scared to send it to you. I said, just send it. So he sent it to me. And this is what I read. And please, this isn't verbatim, but you get the gist. He started saying, dear Lynn, dear Steve, your musical, if you read the stage directions of the printed version of your musical Ragtime, it begins, a black man walks to a piano, sits down and plays. Do you therefore acknowledge that every production of your show so far has been a lie?
Oh, wow.
We would like to rectify that. And I read, you know, you sort of read something, you go cold, you go, I mean, there's no way we can send that. There's no way we can send that. At that point, I just pressed send and went, well, we're not going to get the rights anyway. We're not going to be able to do it otherwise. I sort of sat there and went, I've just done it. I've just said send. The call, I mean, I can't remember the time frame. I mean, obviously, it might have been 3 or 4 days. It felt like forever.
Yeah, I bet.
Broadway hates us now. And Sean at the licensing house got back and said, Stephen Flaherty would like to talk to you. And I thought, oh well, that's it. We're over. can I share your email directly with him? I was like, yes. So it was only a Rima. And he wrote back and he just said, you're very audacious, something along those lines. You're incredibly audacious, but I sort of love it. Why not give it a go?
Wow.
And he let us, I mean, and do you know what? He didn't really even want approvals of the orchestrations. He just wanted to know that, I mean, he was very open to questions, and certainly Mark Aspinall, who did the orchestration, who we'll talk about more in a bit. I think there was a rapport was built up, because Stephen Flaherty is one of the nicest men in the world, as you know, and was very, the minute the decision was made, then we were best friends, and we just got, and it was chatting, and what do you think about that bit, and how about if we don't do that there, and it became a dialogue. But it wasn't a dialogue that he insisted upon.
Right, that's interesting.
And over the whole process, there was so much back and forth and so much conversation, and him getting so excited, and he came over for previews, and he was around, and he in and out, and it was so fascinating. We had that incredible relationship with him. We only had one line from Lynn, which was, well, don't change my lyrics.
As always.
Exactly. So it was an interesting dynamic between the two of them. But the minute the decision was made, there was nothing that we could do that would be wrong, and that was incredible.
That's so interesting. Now, of course, to make this happen, now you've mentioned Mark, I think that's probably the next point in this conversation, because only a fantastic orchestrator with the mind of Mark could possibly have translated this score into this new version. I often say to people that this isn't a reduction, it's a reimagination of the score. When did Mark join the conversation?
Oh, I mean, like really early on, like really before we actually went for the rights, because as you say, we knew we had to have somebody who could. I mean, I'm not saying that there's plenty of people in the world who would have been up to the job, but someone who was in our family, who was a part of that made sense for us to do it. That was also prepared to work. We weren't reimagining this show for the London Palladium that was going to run for 10 years. So budgets again were realistic. So we're not going to be writing to, I mean, you think about all that list of American orchestrators that would have been the person you would have gone to if you'd been doing this at the Palladium, possibly. Yeah. You know that you're not going to get those. But also, Mark and Tom and I had worked together on a couple of shows before, so we knew we had a great shorthand. And as you say, he's a musical. His mind is fantastic, and he can hear things in a way that a lot of people can't. And he just sort of knew how to put it together for the band size that we had, and knowing that they also had to be on stage, they had to be able to move with their instruments, they had to be able to sing at the same time. So all those things that he took all of that into consideration when he was writing illustrations.
It's such a complicated affair, and it's one of those things that everything comes together quite last minute. Even in orchestration terms, usually in a non-actor-muso production, either the orchestration is done before the first day of rehearsals or it's done throughout. But we were changing things right up to the last minute.
You do. I mean, in rehearsals, I don't like that. Can you do that instead? But suddenly, well, I can't do that if I'm playing a bloody trumpet. So then things get changed. Absolutely. But that change is the knock-on effect of that change can be enormous. Because you change, as you know, with music, if you change one instrument, you probably have to change 15 others around it, because you can't just change that one thing.
Of course. Now, the thing that I get asked all the time about casting at musician productions, specifically Ragtime, I get questions like, did you know you wanted a cellist as Evelyn? And things like that. I mean, you were the casting director, so I think it should come from your mouth. How did we cast this show?
How did we? Do you know what? I mean, scaring. It was every day was sort of a huge revelation, but also every day we walked into the room not knowing what we were doing. I mean, we of course we knew what we were doing. We knew we had a list of instruments that we knew we needed. But I tell you something, the list of instruments we had on day one of casting was not the same as what we ended up on the end of casting, nor, may I say, was it the same as what we ended up with in the show.
No, that's true.
Funny enough, in my earlier comment, I said about I can't do that if I'm blowing a bloody trumpet. We cut the trumpet, if you remember.
I remember we cut the trumpet and we gained a drummer. I think
we did. We cut the trumpet for a drummer because that makes logical musical sense, doesn't it?
It made perfect sense.
But yeah, and we lost a reed player 2 days into rehearsal. So then we had so going back to talking about casting, the answer to the question is no, we didn't say Evelyn Nesbit needs to play the cello and Willie Conklin needs to play the banjo. None of that. We basically got, this is the band, who are the best players for it, and then how do we cast the show around them? It was the only way to do it, because if Stephen Flaherty had trusted us to do an actor-musician production of Ragtime, we had to give him the very best orchestra we possibly could. So you can't, I'm sure a lot of the actors listening, you'll go to an audition, and there'll constantly be a fight between, is the MD going to win or is the choreographer going to win? You might have someone who's an amazing singer but can't really dance, or an amazing dancer but can't really sing. Who's going to win? There's going to be an argument. One of them's going to go out the window. With this show, we just simply didn't have that luxury. They had to be able to play.
Yeah, really well too.
And well enough to be in the pit of Ragtime, because the music didn't get any easier just because it was played on stage, did it?
I think it got harder.
I think it probably did.
Yeah.
So in terms of casting, it was about narrowing it down and getting a short list of the very best reeds, the very best guitars, the very best whatever the instrument was, and then going, how the hell do we cast this show? And remember, within that, we also had to have an absolute right mix of male versus female, and we had the right mix of ethnicity, simply because that's the way the show is written. So that wasn't about, we want this show to be inclusive. It's like, this show doesn't work unless it isn't. This show doesn't work unless it is. So there has to be a number of the black part of it, the white part of it, and the Jewish part of it. Otherwise, the show doesn't work.
Absolutely.
So it's no good having a lovely, shiny white, but they're the best players in orchestra of, all those, 25-year-old white men who have come out of RAM because they're fabulous. That doesn't work. It can't just be that. So of course it has to be the best players, but there were a lot of other boxes that needed to be ticked.
Absolutely.
For very, very right reasons. So then you get down to the shortlist and go, okay, so now how do we make the show look right? We've made it sound right. Now how do we make it look right? The problem is, though, if you go, okay, so I'm going to have so the man who's going to play who's going to be the main reed chair. I think it was 4 instruments, or maybe even 5. I can't remember.
I can't remember, to be honest now.
Lots. So we cast a man who was in his 60s, I think, and he was going to play some of the older male characters. 3-4 days into rehearsal, he left. So now what do? I now have to find another 65-year-old man who can play 5 reed instruments to replace that. There's only 2 in the bloody country. So so then you get into that really tricky situation of, okay, my next best reed player, who would have got the role, apart from the fact that we already had a woman was a woman. But how do I now replace a 65-year-old man with a 30-year-old woman, 28-year-old woman? Because we've already started rehearsing. So do I take roles away from? And it was a nightmare, but a wonderful nightmare. It was the hardest jigsaw puzzle I've ever done. But the satisfaction when you put that final bit in the middle of the jigsaw and it's done is incredible.
Absolutely.
And what it taught me was, because again, I think I'd maybe had a preconception of maybe the actor-musician shows that I'd watched in the past, that there would always be something lacking. You would always have, if you're a good player, you won't be a great singer, or if you're a great singer, you won't be a great player, or the acting would be there. What I realise is we have the most extraordinary actor-musicians in this country. And we talk about triple threat in musical theatre. They're triple threat plus, because they're triple threat. They have to be able to sing, dance and act to the level that I'm prepared to accept being in a show of mine. And then you're going to play to an orchestra standard as well, without sheet music.
Yes.
I mean, I think if you're all actor musicians who are listening, I think you're all amazing.
Seconded. Absolutely. It's a remarkable process. It really is. It was completely different to anything I'd done, certainly. And I'd learned so much from that process that I now take into when I do a straight show with a band in a pit. Some of the techniques, especially of like when you're doing a show and you have to mark a vamp or something like that, and you have to show it very clearly. On stage, it was very much we were telepathically telling each other when to come out of the vamp and things like that, and it just all sort of just flew very naturally. It's a very odd sensation.
But I think you're right. I think because by nature of having to, acting musicians are so intuitive. Because you're right. You haven't got someone standing in front of you doing whatever that thing you do with your hands is. You know, you didn't have you doing that. You were too busy playing 2 pianos at once while being spun around the stage in a bowler hat.
Yeah, I do often tell people that it was like being on a ride at Disney.
Yeah.
And just hopping on, hopping off, like that's it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. And what would your like top 3 tips be for producers or writers thinking of creating their shows for actor musicians?
Well, if you're talking about writers, this is something that I say to writers in any format. Write the show you want to write. Don't write the show that you hope will get produced. And I know that may sound crazy, but I so often get people saying, I'm only going to write a 2-hander because, if I do a show with 20 people in, no one will produce it. It's like, well, that's fine, so long as you've got that story to tell. So if you're going to write an actor musician show, write the show that you want to tell. Write it because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And worry about all the other stuff later. Top tips. I always find that quite a difficult one to answer. I think the top tip for producers though is if you're going to write an actor music, if you're going to produce an actor musician show, understand how actor musicians work, because I think a lot of us don't, and I don't think I did. I think I went into it slightly blinkered. And what I learned so early on was, well, it's all well and good asking them to play the violin in that bit, but if I'm also asking them to do a dance and move that huge piece of set out the way, where do their hands go? Where does their violin go? How do they do that? And rather than sort of being on the back foot and in rehearsal have to say, okay, that doesn't work because we didn't think that through. Think the process through so that you save time in rehearsal and you can just concentrate on doing things, taking the 2 steps forward as opposed to the 2 steps back.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Oh, we've got a couple of questions in the chat. Let's just go through some of them now. Neil Bastian. Hi, Neil. Hope you're well.
Nice to see you.
You probably always get this one, but did you pay them equity rates or musician union rates?
Because it's in an off-West End theatre, we paid equity fringe agreement, or we paid slightly above equity fringe agreements. So it was neither of those things because it wasn't an equity or MU contract.
For sure. But interestingly, actor musicians are considered actors.
They are, yes. Sorry. So the generic answer to your question is that they would be equity, not MU.
For sure. And Ian Good. Hi, Ian. Nice to see you here. Given the standard of the score and how much of it there was, it's about 2 hours worth, I think, was committing it to memory an issue?
Well, Ian, I think I'm the wrong person to ask because my answer would be, no, they were fine. Whether they were or not in the process, I don't know. But they got there by the time we got to first preview, or so, actually by the time we got to tech, everybody was completely off. I found it absolutely amazing that we had a week of music learning beforehand. I think
we had a week and a half.
A week and a half.
A week and a half, and we didn't actually get through everything.
No,
and,
but by the end of that first week and a half, nobody brought any music on stage. They knew it.
That is true. That is true. Yeah, it was very much.
Didn't always be right, and some things went, didn't work, and sometimes you had to nip off stage and pick up some music and check things. But the reality was, in a week and a half, they were sort of off book, if that's what you use the same phrase for actor musos, for the music as you do for
Absolutely.
Learning. And the other thing, of course, you've got to remember is they also need to be off book on everything else, because you can't hold a violin and a script. Let alone you can't hold a score, you can't hold a script. So whereas, actors doing a straight play will have the script in their hand until the director tells them not to. All of that, they couldn't do that.
It's so true. Absolutely true. And I think overall we had a week and a half music calls, and then must have been 3.5. Must have been a 4-week rehearsal period that we had.
Then 2.5 weeks of staging, and then we had a slightly longer tech period than we normally do, tech and a really chunky preview period, because. Well, the thing that everybody knows about Tom Sutherland, who has ever worked with him, is he changes the entire show in previews. This one, I said, you can't do that with this one. You can't expect them to learn, to write new music, to put something in for a transition because you're doing a different scene change, and then to know it. You can't
and then memorize it. Yeah.
Apart from the fact I think he did it anyway, and I think that you guys did it anyway because you're all brilliant.
Yeah, I was just astounded by how well they perceived everything and picked it up so quickly. The one thing I will say about memorization is, and this revealed a lot to me. Those nights that we did concerts of the show, those were the nights that I struggled the most with memorization, because I attributed a lot of my blocking or positioning of the piano to moments of the score.
Yes.
I know, right, when I'm, you know, by the drummer, I'm doing the Getting Ready Rag and I'm doing the Accelerando. And then when I get moved down there, I'm playing this lick. And then when I'm stood still for the whole show, I had to focus so hard. And I didn't actually realize until that point how much of my memory was dependent on the staging of the show.
Absolutely.
And if anything went slightly wrong, that would also affect my memorization as well.
Sure. Well, because you know, subconscious memory, that those things that we don't understand quite how we've memorized something do.
Mm-hmm.
They're connected to so many things. Sometimes it can be a smell, can't it? You know, you have a smell and suddenly you remember where you were when, you know. So all those things about memory they're not just about I've learned this, therefore it will be in my memory forever.
Yeah.
So much of it is subconscious. Yeah.
Sure. And Ken Bailey. Hi, Ken. Hope you're well. Following Morgan Yeston's Titanic, you produced his Death Takes a Holiday. Have you ever considered any other Irons and Flaherty shows?
Yes, I have, and I'm considering one right now. And I'm not allowed to tell you anymore. I have. There are some that I love but don't want to produce, just because I think they've either been done or they're just not quite for me. I love listening to their stuff. I think they just write the most beautiful songs.
Mm.
There are a couple of musicals that they've written that I love the music, but I don't love necessarily the show around it. So wouldn't necessarily be my cup of tea. But there is one I'm looking at the moment. Yes.
Okay. Well, I will guess and I'll text you later. So it's important to note, I think, that we opened the production during the election of 2016 in America, the Trump election, and I have a lot of memories of the night that we performed when Trump won the election. Actually, it was a particularly somber evening for the production, given how relevant it was. It was shockingly relevant. Do you think there'll ever be a point where this show isn't relevant?
No. I mean, that's the terrifying thing, isn't it? I don't think the world. Wouldn't it be lovely if we thought the world could write itself? Wouldn't it be lovely if we didn't have to talk about Black Lives Matter? If we didn't have to do any of that stuff? But I don't know. Maybe I'm being. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see a time where we're not fighting a cause. And inequality and race are issues that are just. I mean, like every day. I mean, think about. I mean, in 2016, we were dealing with Trump. Last year, look what we were dealing with. Now, a lot of that was indirectly related to Trump. But if Trump wasn't in power, those things would still be happening. Those things are still happening. So, no, I don't think there will ever be a time when Ragtime isn't relevant, because Ragtime is so much about all the things that the very worst that happens in our world.
Yes. Absolutely. I think we were talking before that when Lynn came to watch, it was the first time she'd watched the show since the election.
Yeah.
And she gave some really interesting insights of all of that when she talked at the end of the show. And it was really sad, actually. It was very sad.
No, I know I was there. Yes, I was there that night. I was absolutely there. The night that I wasn't there was the night that the election actually happened, because I was actually sitting with a couple of American and Canadian friends watching the election unfold, just having the worst night. But what I remember so clearly about that period of time was I remember in previews, quite early on in previews, a quite elderly gentleman from America came up to me. He was from I want to say Texas, but I could be wrong. But he was anti-Trump, and he took my hand. We never met before, and he took my hand and said, "Are you part of the production?" He took my hand and said, "You have to bring it over, because we need this show. We need to see this show now." And it was before. I can't remember the time frame, but like somehow, if we'd managed to get the show over and enough people could have seen it, the wrong thing wouldn't have happened. Which I thought was, I mean, wonderful. I mean, the power of theatre, right? But
yeah.
He was genuinely moved, and sort of, it was. I mean, I don't think for a second he believed that we would pick the show up, go over there, and change the election. But he was so adamant that that this. this needs to be seen, and this message needs to be out there. And God, if we've ever needed it, we need it now.
So true. Okay, a couple more questions. Who we got? Acting Silly. Hi, Acting Silly. Given you've acknowledged casting had to be non-inclusive, his first question is, was that a condition of the rights? And secondly, how likely is it that as a white Jewish actor pianist, would I ever get to play Cole House?
Was it a condition of the rights? I don't know, but it wouldn't have mattered to me if it wasn't, because the show was about race. I mean, this could end up now becoming another whole conversation that we could have on another day for, that would fill the whole time. But there are certain productions, many productions, most productions that there is absolutely no reason why you can't cast the colorblind. I don't love the phrase colorblind because that suggests we don't see color, and I think we do see. Of course, we see color. We see it. But there are certain shows where it doesn't matter who plays.
Yes,
characters. It just doesn't matter whether it's black or Jewish or male or female. It doesn't matter. Yeah. There are certain shows, though, however, where I think it absolutely does matter, and Ragtime is one of them. Because if the white family aren't white, and the black family aren't black, and the Jews aren't from that part of the world, then I don't understand the story. Then you're actually getting in the way of the telling of the story. And so therefore, I think it is incredibly important that Cole House is black, because the story doesn't make sense if he isn't. Now, I think there might be a world where you turn everything on its head, but you would have to turn everything on its head.
Yes.
I don't think you can do. I don't think it would make sense if you picked a tune if it just became anyone can play anything. That is my opinion. Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah. Less color blind, but I don't know what it would be. Color ignorant or color. I don't know what the word might be.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't want to harp too much on the Tim Sheeder production that was at Regent's Park, the last production of Ragtime there were, but just for a reason that I couldn't quite fathom. Grandfather was black.
Oh yes.
Apart from him saying that's coon music and getting a big laugh, I didn't really see the point of it. So I didn't understand that. But again, and I know the show really well, I would imagine people going to see the show who didn't know it, seeing a black grandfather, having such a negative reaction to Cole House, a black man coming into their house. I think that would have confused people.
Yes. I think you've hit the nail on the head here, that whatever you do with your casting, it has to serve the story first. Indeed. And something like that, confusing the audience, and as you know, with musical theatre, it's clarity first. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And okay, Neil Bastian has another question. Okay, it's over 2 comments, so here we go. R.E. Trump, Danielle, I saw you give a talk for Mercury Musical Developments ages ago, saying that you were planning on doing a show that was dependent on whether Trump got in for a second term or not. Thankfully, he didn't. So can you now reveal what that show would have been?
Oh God, Neil, I've got absolutely no idea. Never quote things back at me. I was probably drunk. I genuinely. Do you know what? Okay, I've got an idea. Of, yes, I think what it was. And yes, the moment has passed. I'm not going to say what it is, though, because someone else, I think, is doing it. There's a whole political nonsense going on with the rights for the show in question. So I'm not going to say it in a public forum. Neil, if I happen to bump into you in a bar sometime, which is inevitable, I will tell you privately.
Outstanding. Brilliant. Now, when we got through our run, and so I think it was somewhere near the middle, or in the latter half of the run, we ran into some issues in terms of understudies for certain roles, and it's a really difficult thing to understudy an actor-musician production. Certainly to keep the integrity of the orchestration, like you could have a pianist off stage just in case, but that certainly doesn't. That's not reflective of Mark's work, and added onto the economics of the Off West End and things like that, sometimes it's just not possible. However, we ended up having an incredible last minute cover, didn't we, for the role of Mother?
Yes. Yes, well, who actually wasn't an actor-muso. That role ended up not being an actor-muso. Not saying when we cast the show originally it wasn't. We knew it wasn't going to be, but it just ended up being. There were, I think, 4 roles in the show. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jordan, if you can remember. I think that didn't play, or I mean, hit a triangle, but I don't consider them actor-musicians.
Yes,
they haven't trained in musicianship. But I think there were a handful of roles that didn't play. And again, they could have been anyone. But yeah, one of them ended up being Mother. And yes, we'd seen a production that you were also involved with, Jordan, which had been a sort of a pro-am production at the Bishopsgate Institute, which I'd seen 3 or 4 months before. I can't remember, maybe longer ago than that. Can't remember. And the woman who was playing Mother in that production, who at that time was an amateur. I mean, she was an ex-pro. She'd come over from Australia, but what hadn't gotten on spotlight. She was considered an amateur at that point in her career in this country, and she sang the role, and I thought she was very good. And then we lost. Our Mother went down with a horrendous chest. I can't remember whether it was a chest or a laryngitis or whatever it was. And we didn't have full understudies for the show, because understudying an actor musician show is impossible, near impossible, but I think actually impossible. So what am I going to do? I'm not going to shut down the production. So we called her. I called her at, I don't know, 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. She was in by 11. She was on stage by 12, and she did the matinee with a book in her hand.
Yes.
But she did it, and she ended up doing, I think, 8 or 9 performances, didn't she? Until
I think that's right. Yeah.
But if we're talking about understudies, that was easy, because she wasn't an actor-muso. Like you say, to cover. Now I do know that Evelyn Nesbit plays the cello. My understudy has to be a woman in her mid-20s who plays the cello, and and also has to sing, dance, and act. But also on top of this, because Tom directed the most ridiculous production in the universe, the way the set moved. I mean, anyone who saw it will understand this. We had these enormous set pieces, huge pieces of set that got moved around the stage, and the piano getting moved. So just to do the stage directions alone would have taken someone who had to have. You couldn't just put someone on stage who didn't know what they were doing, because people could have got hurt.
Yes, it's true. Yeah.
So and a lot of the reason why we decided to turn when we did have, I think at one point we had 4 people off, didn't we, out of a cast of 20 something? Maybe even more. The main reason for doing a concert version of it was because I didn't feel it was safe to have people who didn't know what they were doing on stage. Or we could have easily said, cut the violin, just take it out completely, cut the violin. It won't sound as good, but cut the violin. But that violinist moved enormous pieces of furniture around and did stuff that was integral to the show being safely carried out. That no one else could have just stepped in to do. So it was, I found it incredibly challenging. I think it was the most challenging thing of my career, was how to make it. Yeah, really, seriously, how to make that work, how to not cancel.
Yes.
How to give the audience something. How to keep the integrity of the show, keep the integrity of the musicianship, and try very hard to keep everyone on stage happy.
Yes, absolutely. It's a difficult thing.
Absolutely.
Right. Have we got any more questions? Let's have a look, shall we? Hi, Kyo Choi. Hi, Kyo. Hope you're well. She's a writer working on a commissioned musical now that requires all actors, singers and dancers of a specific ethnicity, not black. Are UK audiences ready for this?
I don't see why not. But I mean, listen, I think UK audiences are ready for anything so long as it's good. I think if the show is good and it's telling a story that's very specific to whatever ethnicity you're relating to, why not? Why not tell us something we don't know?
Absolutely. Have you ever thought of doing actor-muso again?
Oh, please don't make me do it again. No, I'm joking. I would definitely say that after Ragtime, I think I probably said immediately after Ragtime or during Ragtime, I said never again. It's too hard. And I don't mean, and that's no reflection on actor musicians. That's a reflection on me and my ability and what I want to do and my own sanity and getting through life day to day and not having a heart attack. So I think at the time I think I said no. And certainly people have said, will you bring Ragtime back? I don't think I would bring Ragtime back because I don't think I'd ever want to do it less than we did at that time. And it would be not the reason, wrong. I was going to say the reason we did it was because it was cost effective to do it actor musician. That wasn't the reason, but that was one of the reasons. And if the only way to make that production sing again is to have a whole bunch of offstage understudies, then we might as well just have done it with a band and actors. Even though that wasn't the concept we wanted to do, but you understand what I mean.
Absolutely.
So it would just have to be, and I think, I mean, especially, you know, to tour it, for instance, you would literally have to have a second team of stage management to move the set. You'd have to have offstage players to fill in the gaps, and then you'd have to have actors on stage with reading or covering. I don't think there was a way, or there is a way of doing it, but we would have needed 12 weeks rehearsal.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
You almost had to have had 3 casts.
It's true. Yeah, to keep that going. It was a hard show in terms of how much, not just how much they were playing, of course, and all that sort of thing, but involving everything in terms of the piano movements and the set movements, which was all done by the cast on stage. It was a hard show, and with a remarkable cast who could pull it off. You know. Yeah. Right, so to finish it off, unless we get some more questions, I'm just going to do some quick fire things. I'm just going to say
forget my name. Okay, go on.
Okay, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, red or blue?
Blue.
Chinese or Indian takeout?
Oh, damn it. I can't do Chinese. I don't believe that though. I mean, but I don't believe Indian either. Carry on.
Brilliant. Rodgers and Hammerstein or Lerner and Lowe?
Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Interesting. The Golden Age or contemporary MT?
Contemporary.
Jason Robert Brown or Pasek and Paul?
Oh, stop. Come on. What if they're watching? Are you kidding me? I'm absolutely not answering that. I am personal friends with all 3 of them. I'm not answering it.
That's a shame.
I'm definitely not answering it.
Okay. Jerry Herman, Kander and Ebb.
I'm about to produce Chicago in Slovenia, so I'm going to say Kander and Ebb.
Well, there we go. That's what I was hoping for. Then you can do a little plug of that. Very good. In
Slovenia, the 16th to the 21st of August. Please come and see Chicago.
In Slovenia.
Can you imagine?
Brilliant. We've got a couple of questions here. Jonathan Reed. Hi, Jonathan. Hope you're well. What makes a show need to be a muso production as opposed to a normal show? What's the qualities that would be required? I
think, for me, I mean, and I suppose the reason we wanted, I'm going to taking it back to Ragtime. Ragtime is about music, so put it front and center. So for me, I think if you're going to have actor musicians, there has to be a reason. Why are the actors playing an instrument? You know, the question that people often ask about musical theatre, people who don't like or don't know musical theatre, they say, why does everyone keep singing all the time? We can completely justify that as people in musical theatre. We completely justify. We would never even ask the question. But I think the question for actor musician shows just goes one step further. Why do they need to play on stage? So for me, there has to be a reason. I have to not be watching an actor suddenly bring out a bassoon for no reason, because it's just especially a bassoon. But no, I think so. For me, it's about just does it make sense to the story? Will I stop worrying about someone picking up an instrument and playing it? I don't know if any of you saw Bright Star when it was on Broadway. It wasn't there for very long, but it wasn't actor-muso as such. They had the band was constantly on stage, and they had 3 or 4 of the actors were musicians. So once they would sit down and just pick up a guitar and start playing. Well, I understand that completely. I understand why someone picks up a guitar and starts playing, because people pick up guitars and start playing and start singing.
Yeah, because it's part of the story. Yeah.
So long as it makes good sense to me, then any show can be. But so long as it's not shoehorned in just for the sake of saving money.
For sure. I think
one of the question, Jonathan.
One of the most exciting things in Ragtime for me was when instruments were used as objects that they were not, such as the accordion being Houdini's straight things like that. That was quite fun. That really good fun. Nice one. Yeah, nice question there. And Jonathan continues actually and says, "Is it easier to make classic or contemporary musicals into muso productions?"
Again, I don't think there's a right answer to that, because I think it's about it's about the show. It's about what the show is. I think we've probably seen more contemporary actor-muso shows, but that's because people are writing them as that, whereas there weren't a huge number of actor-musician shows written in the classic era, so they are reinventions of. Whereas now people are actually specifically writing shows for that genre.
For sure.
I certainly don't think I'd be less inclined to hear a Rodgers and Hammerstein done actor-muso than I would a Jason Robert Brown show, for instance.
Well, I missed it on Broadway, but the wonderful Oklahoma, which was
I missed it too. So yes, furious.
Neil, hi Neil again. I can't actually remember whether this is true or not, but in actor-musician shows, are there certain players who never sing? I.e., does a tuba player ever sing, or a violinist, etc.?
Well, I mean, I can tell you, without wanting to seem like I'm being facetious, is a tuba player never sings when he's playing. And if you can't work that one out, go away and think about it. No, there are absolutely occasions, and I say we did have this. We did have it, but we made them sing. Our double bassist was a professional musician, not an actor-muso.
And that was the only professional player we had in the show.
I mean, and I'm not saying that actor-musos aren't professional, but you know what I mean. Professional pit player. It just happens that he had an all right. He had a better than an all right voice. It was bad, so we wrote him in. But it was our intention that when we found that if he didn't sing, it wouldn't be a problem. But no, I mean, violin. I would be disappointed if a violinist wasn't singing all the time they were playing. And our violinist Kate, who is currently in Amelie, another plug for someone else's show, but if you haven't seen it, go and see it. It is unbelievably good. But I mean, you try and stopping her playing and singing and dancing and acting and moving a bloody great bit of set furniture at the same time. So yeah, there are certainly occasions where you might have a pro player who is not an actor-muso on stage in an actor-musician show. But my answer would be, if it's actor-musician, surely as many voices and as many instruments as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly for us, we were, because we had quite a few blowers and things like that, they would have to stop playing in order to sing something that we absolutely needed them to sing, but they wouldn't need to sing the whole chorus, for instance. So blah, 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 and then playing.
Is getting ready rag, where the music all stops. So they play, stop, get in, ready, rag, and they start playing. So yeah, instruments go up and down all the time.
Yeah, and it's really hard to sing and play at the same time. I remember Martin, one of our bass players, because we had two, I think, playing the bass line but singing the tenor line is a very hard thing to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. Like, singing and piano is a different thing because it's homogenous. You're just creating the whole thing. But when you have one line, and it's often something that if you played it on its own, you'd be like, "What is that?" And then singing at the same time it's one of them. It's one of them.
Yeah,
absolutely. Brilliant. Well, I need to book my tickets to see Amelie again because.
Oh yes, absolutely. I could watch it. Do you know it was my most listened to cast recording over lockdown.
Oh really? That's interesting.
I can listen to the show back. I can listen to it back to back. I can finish it and go back to the beginning and listen to it again. I think it's absolutely glorious, and I think it's such a wonderful thing that the show didn't really work on Broadway, and they rewrote it, and we've done it better. And I don't mean we; it's the same writers. I'm not being, but it's a European story. It's a story that sits better over here than it did there. And the cast is just go and see it. Honestly, I have no interest in it. I don't get any money from saying this, but just go and see it. Do yourself a favor. You will have the most amazing time.
It's true. Well, this is a little bit of a diversion, but it's true. French shows don't do well on Broadway.
Yeah. No, we know that, don't we?
No, yeah.
Indeed.
How long did the more run on Broadway? I think it was like a week and a half or something.
They definitely got through a whole show.
Bless. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, to finish off, let's just say, what's the biggest lesson you learned from doing this show?
Don't do an actor-muso show. That's what I thought at the time. I genuinely at the time. I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. It was. We created something incredible. We created something glorious that I will be more proud of than most, because it was so hard. What we overcame to get to the point we got to was incredible, frankly. And I don't say that to blow my own. I say that because that's how I felt. It felt like we had climbed Everest and got to the top in one piece. Whereas some shows feel like a walk in the park. I mean, somebody mentioned that, I think it was Ken, mentioned that the show that we did immediately afterwards was Death Takes a Holiday. Death Takes a Holiday was literally like going from learning how to paint the Mona Lisa to trying to stay with a wax crayon within the lines in a child's colouring book. It just seems so easy. It just seems so easy in comparison. Oh, we've just got actors who speak and sing and go home. Love that. But what did I learn? I learned the power of music. I think I connected to music so deeply with that show. Mm-hmm. I learned a respect for a bunch of people that I had before, but it just went to another level. And I learned again. So I think it was reaffirming things that I already knew, but maybe had forgotten to think about. Because I think the most important is it made me realize how much I love my job and how magical theatre can be when we get it right. Yeah, it's so true. The right people at the right time in the same room. Yeah, it's the thing that we always chase. But absolutely. Yeah. And I think, God, I mean, not, maybe this is the wrong way to enter that tonight, but after the year that we've just had, isn't it nice just to keep that in the very front of our minds? Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, to finish off here, we've got some lovely comments here. Acting Silly says, I will reiterate that your Ragtime was flawless. I was so in awe of the production values, and especially Jordan playing and MDing that whole score from memory. You guys are heroes. Joe. His name's Joe. Thank you, Joe. Can I just let you know that the story that, funnily enough, Jordan hasn't told us tonight, which I thought he might, but I'm not surprised. About week 3 of rehearsal, so i.e. with a week to go, Jordan said, sorry, do I have to be off book too? Yeah, Jordan, you do. So Jordan didn't actually realise that he couldn't have a score on either piano until 3/4 of the way through the rehearsal process. There you go. Didn't tell us, did you, Jordan? No, it was because I remember this, we were blocking the trashing of the car. Yes. And for Tom's direction, we had to take the piano apart. We had to take the front off, all that. But of course, to take the front off meant taking my score off. So I was like, where do I put my score, Tom? And he said, well, you haven't got it, have you? Lovely. I mean, just a glorious, that moment when you go, oh. Yeah. So, memorizing that in a week was great fun. Oh, fantastic. Have we got any other things I will add on? Ken, what a wonderful chat. Hope to see it available on YouTube for a second watch. Thank you. Caitlin Burt, this was genuinely one of the best shows I've ever seen. Thanks, Caitlin. That's very, very nice of you. Well, and may I say, you're not too bad a lyricist yourself, darling. So you carry on. Exactly. We've just got one more question. Let's just chuck it in really quickly. I think you know him, Ben Winter. Hi, Ben. Well, what is it about Aaron and Flaherty's music from their shows that you enjoy the most and sets them apart from other MT composers? So I don't think it sets them apart, because then I would be saying that I think they're better than, and I don't think it's that. I think I couldn't choose. Like, people say, who's your favorite composer? It's like asking a parent who's your favorite child. Just can't answer it. But what I do think is that it's what I love about music, and the shows that I want to produce, there's a lushness to the musicality, even if it's only with 5 instruments. It makes good sense. It sits nicely in your ears, and I think Aaron and Flaherty know how to write a good tune. There's nothing wrong with Adam Gettle. There's nothing wrong with that sort of sound. But once in a while, I just want something that sounds harmonious and beautiful and lush and simple in a sense, maybe, that just is beautiful. And I think they do beautiful really, really well.
Definitely. I think accessible is the word, isn't it?
Okay, yes, that's a great word.
Yeah, and I always feel, whenever I watch any of their shows, I feel like I'm in safe hands, if you know what I mean. Like they are, you know, the structure geniuses, you know, they know what they're doing, basically.
They certainly do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Danielle, for your time this evening. Thank
you for having me. And I didn't realize I was your inaugural chat. So I didn't realize you popped your cherry with me, Jordan. I didn't know that.
Well, I'm honoured. So,
well, thank you, and it's always lovely to work with you.
Likewise.
To see you, and thank you everyone for tuning in.
Absolutely, thanks everyone. All right, bye, Danielle.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks everyone for coming along and watching tonight. Now, if you yourself are an actor musician or a creative who works in actor musician shows, or you're either of those things and you're just interested in actor musician productions, or maybe you're a writer, consider joining the actor-muso community group on Facebook. It's totally free, and we discuss and we debate and we converse about everything to do with actor musicians. There'll be more events like this, and we will be starting a fortnightly or monthly, depending, sort of social meetups and support groups in order to connect with everyone in the industry and support each other as we make our way out of this pandemic and hopefully into the light. So if you're interested in the stuff we're going to do and more like this, then please join the group. And that's it for me tonight. Have a great night, and hopefully I'll see you all soon. Bye bye.